Hello everyone and welcome to the updated melee weapon tier list for Markus Kruber. Starting off in D tier today, I have the Bretonnian Sword and Shield. So the biggest problem with the Brett Sword and Shield, in my opinion, is that its attacks are clunky and awkward feeling. The shield bash that you can do doesn't come first in the sequence of attacks, which is never a good sign with shield weapons. You can do it second after you push. You can push and then like shield bash, which I guess that's fine. But then there's another one you can do where you have to attack twice, and then it's the third sequence of attacks as a shield bash. I don't understand what kind of purpose that serves, but for attack speeds, pretty good across the board. Well, it's light attacks. Light attack 2 looking maybe just a bit slow there. Push attacks very quick, as it needs to be because it's a stab outwards. And all the heavy attacks are pretty quick as well. As you can see here, the cleave limit outside of the first light attack is pretty low, and the same thing with the stagger force, pretty low as well. Adding on top of that, some pretty low base damage. And the fact that only a couple attacks can even do any damage to armor. These linesman modifiers don't mean much if your damage is super low. You've got 5 shields. You can dodge 4 times. You don't get a dodge bonus. Your block angle is 120 instead of 180 would be nice, of course, but I don't really understand the purpose of this weapon in the game. Never really understood why they gave Grill Knight this weapon. I mean, it doesn't shine in any one particular area outside of you can push then bash. So it's kind of good for temp health if you don't mind doing no damage. Sure. But it just doesn't have anything going for it outside of it's a shield. It doesn't complement any kind of weapon really well. It doesn't stand on its own very well at all. I don't like it, so I've got it in D tier. Next up in D tier, I've got the Sword and Shield. So the one thing the Sword and Shield has going for it is pretty fast, as all of its attacks clock in under 0.7 seconds, and all but the third light attack here clock in under 0.6, which is pretty good. It even has some pretty good cleave on these light attacks, some decent stagger force on a couple of attacks. As you can see here, kind of low base damage, but where it really struggles is, look over here. Only the push attack and the second heavy attack deal any damage to armor at all. That is not good. If this is your only melee weapon, you're kind of tying your hand, your foot, and your other hand behind your back and just trying to fight with one leg. This weapon does next to nothing against armor, and I don't really understand why. And until this is remedied, this weapon remains a solid D tier choice for me. On top of that, you get no dodge bonus, and you only get 2 for an effective dodge count. Not great. D tier. And that is all the D tier weapons that I have for you today. Moving up to C tier, I've got the Mace. Now, the biggest advantage of the Mace, just like Barden's one-handed hammer, is its high stamina count. At 4.5, that's almost as much as a shield weapon, without you having the hindrance of the low damage capability of a shield. The Mace also is pretty fast outside of that 4th light attack. All the attacks are fairly quick, especially the push attack and the 2 heavy attacks. Really quick, which is nice. These heavy attacks capable of dealing pretty good base damage to both infantry and armored enemies, which is nice. You have some tank modifiers here, which will help you hit multiple armored targets. This 3rd light attack is a uppercut, so it gets 10% bonus crit chance, and it also has a tank modifier, which is cool. So definitely an improvement from the previous 2 weapons we've looked at. Higher damage, better against armor, a couple modifiers, almost the same amount of stamina, 20% dodge bonus, and a 3 dodge count is pretty good. But the biggest problem for me with this weapon is the awkwardness. I do believe that attack motions, the way a weapon feels, is a pretty big and important factor to a weapon's effectiveness. If a weapon is weird and clunky and attacks in a strange X formation, personally for me, that doesn't appeal to me. I don't like that. And I think that really makes it hard to kind of like not only aim at enemy heads and stuff like that. I'm talking about these light attacks, of course. The heavy attacks are fine. And they're pretty good, honestly. Even the push attack, pretty solid. But these light attacks, they're just too weird. I don't like them. They're just kind of all over the place. They're not really amazing for hordes. I just feel like it's awkward. This is really the best way I can put it. And I said the same thing about Barden's one-handed hammer in the last video, but yeah, this weapon's weird. I don't like it. It's got some good things for it, surely, but I do believe that those attack sequences and those motions hinder it a lot. Next up in C tier, I have the Greatsword. Now, the Greatsword is about as simple a weapon as you're going to find in Vermintide 2. It's pretty much like diagonal attack from the right, diagonal attack from the left. So you have two light attacks here. They're not super fast. They're 0.7 seconds, so that's a little slow for light attacks. Its push attack is kind of like an over-the-top, downward, headshot-y type of attack, same speed. Its heavy attacks, funny enough, are a little bit faster, which I think is kind of funny. You would think that like a heavy attack would be a little slower, but not in this case. But they're the same motions, which is kind of funny. It's just like diagonal attacks. So as you can see here, these light attacks, tremendous amount of cleave, pretty good stagger force. The push attack, not so much, but it doesn't need to be because it's just a headshot attack. And then the heavy attacks, of course, you're going to have more cleave as well, more stagger force, so it makes sense. The damage, the light attack damage isn't fantastic. It's all right. But the heavy attack and push attack damage is actually pretty good. You know, almost 30 on these heavy attacks. Almost 30 again on the push attack. The bad thing about these light attacks, they don't do any armor damage. They do have linesman modifiers, which is really nice. That'll help them cleave through hordes. That's pretty good. The push attack is your best armor damaging attack. And especially since you can get a headshot, you can do even more than this 15.5 here. These heavy attacks, you know, not amazing armor damage. You do have the heavy linesman modifiers on here, which is nice. You can cleave through even more things, which is why the cleave is so much higher here than these light attacks. So that's really nice to see. You have 3 stamina shields, you have a 3 effective dodge count, you have a 10% dodge bonus, which is kind of nice. But yeah, this is pretty much just like a simple man's swing and occasionally push attack weapon. It's really good for hordes, really good for infantry. Can deal with armor, but not amazing for armor. Personally, I think this weapon's just a little too not great against armor to bump up to B tier, so I've got it in the C tier. But it has some good things going for it, I will admit. And our final C tier weapon today, I have the Halberd. Now, when I first started playing this game, the Halberd was one of my favorite weapons. I loved the amount of reach that you had on it. I loved how you could make easy temp health with it. But as I've played more, I've realized it's just not so good, you know, not as good as compared to some of the other weapons that are out there. So let's talk about it. This first light attack is really slow, clocking in at 0.81 seconds. That is very slow. All of its other attacks are okay for speed, under 0.7 for about half of them. You have, of course, this second heavy attack nice and fast at 0.48, so that's cool. You have some good cleave on that first light attack and that first heavy attack, which makes sense because the other ones are like stab outs and down cuts and stuff like that. Stagger force, again, pretty decent on that first light attack and that first heavy attack. Your base damage is actually pretty good for all the light attacks and the heavy attacks. And what's cool about the Halberd is that all the attacks can deal some kind of damage to armor. Of course, the most coming from that third light attack, that push attack, and that second heavy attack. You have a linesman modifier on the first light attack, which gives it some cleave, and a heavy linesman on the first heavy attack, giving it even more cleave, which is nice. Kind of the bad thing about the Halberd, you have 3 stamina shields, a 3 effective dodge count, no dodge bonus, so the Halberd lacks mobility, right? And it lacks defense. So you kind of have to rely on its offense to really stay alive, if that makes sense. And I do believe that it can handle hordes pretty good. You have the classic light 1 block cancel, light 1 for horde clearing, for temp health generating. And then you have the light 1, which chains into a heavy 1, and then back into a light 1, and then back into a heavy 1. So really the attacks that make the most use of anything on a halberd are these ones with linesman modifiers and heavy linesman modifiers. So this weapon can deal with both infantry and armor, which is nice, but I think its lack of mobility is a bit of a hindrance to it. You don't get any kind of a dodge bonus. The armor damage, while it's capable of dealing with armor from every attack, it's not like a lot. It's kind of, just a minimal amount. You have to attack a couple times to get to an attack that does like good armor damage aside from the push attack, which kind of stinks. So yeah, I've got the halberd in C tier. Bumping up to B tier, I've got the sword. Now, a lot of people don't like the sword, but the more I play, the more I realize, like, I kind of like it, Not only is it really fast with all but one of its attacks clocking at 0.5 or under seconds. These first two light attacks here have nice cleave. Its push attack has nice cleave. Even the second heavy attack's good cleave as well. But look at the stagger force on these two heavy attacks. Like, that's a lot. You can really stagger some stuff here. Its base damage is pretty good. It's a really good infantry weapon. You can take out hordes with it pretty nicely. Not all of its attacks can deal with armor, but that's okay. You just kind of spam those heavy attacks. The armor damage isn't great, but look at this. Linesman modifier on light attack 1, linesman modifier on light attack 2, linesman modifier on push attack, giving it all nice cleave on those weapons, and then tank modifiers, which I believe is the best one. The best modifier you can get on heavy attacks. You can hit multiple armored targets with this tank modifier here, which is really good. So you don't do tons of damage, but you're capable of dealing with it. You have a tank modifier, and you get 4 stamina shields. You get a 20% dodge bonus, which is excellent. Only 3 shields, which isn't the end of the world. So yeah, this weapon has some defense. It's really good for infantry. It can deal with armor. It's not amazing for armor, but it has a lot of things going for it. Next up in B tier, I've got the Great Hammer. Now, the Great Hammer is one of those weapons where I believe that you either love it or you hate it, and there's no real in-between feelings on the Great Hammer. So let's talk about it. Its 3 light attacks are all kind of slow. They have low cleave and low stagger force, which makes sense because they're kind of supposed to be for like elites. So the base damage here is pretty high. The armor damage is nice as well, so you're capable of dealing with all types of enemies with these light attacks, well, single targets rather. Personally, I am not a fan of any of the light attacks on the Kruber's Great Hammer, even though they do good damage and can deal with single targets. I just find them to be a little too slow. I always find that I get hit when I try to use these light attacks against elites. But on the flip side, the push attack and the heavy attacks are all really nice. They're a lot faster. Clocking in just above 0.6 seconds is pretty nice. They have higher cleave and much higher stagger force. The base damage is a bit lower for infantry on all the attacks here, and for armor it's considerably lower, but for the 2 heavy attacks you have the tank modifier, which is a great modifier to have. You can hit multiple armored targets. Dealing damage to them is quite nice, and with your massive stagger force you can kind of knock them around, which helps out with your 3 stamina shields, your 2 effective dodge count, and your 0 dodge bonus. So yeah, you're not really going to be hiding too much with the Great Hammer. You're going to be using these heavy attacks to get things out of your way. So this weapon's fun. It's got a couple drawbacks, but definitely a solid choice if you're going to take it. And then the final B tier weapon today, I've got the X-Sword. So back in the day, the Executioner Sword used to be the kind of golden child, the favorite weapon of Kruber mains, because it was fast, it did lots of good damage, it could one-shot elites and stuff like that. But ever since the Big Balance Beta, they kind of slowed it down, which is what you're noticing here with the attack speed. These first 3 light attacks all really slow, 0.8 and 0.9 seconds roughly. The second light attack noticeably slower at almost 1 full second. The push attack and 2 heavy attacks as well, about 0.8 seconds, so again pretty slow. You have decent cleave and stagger force on these first 3 light attacks, as well as the push attack. But where the X-Sword really shines is in damage. The base damage for these light attacks is all pretty nice. They've all got tank modifiers, and the third one's an uppercut, so it gets extra crit chance, 10%, which is cool. Doesn't do any armor damage when you body shot. It does a little bit when you headshot, so but most people aren't going to be light attacking elites with an X-Sword anyway. You're going to be using your heavy attacks down here, because look at the base damage on these heavy attacks. This is what people love the X-Sword for. 42.75, almost 43 base damage for infantry units, 33 for armored. That's really nice. This push attack gets a linesman modifier, by the way, but these heavy attacks, both of them get a plus 20% crit chance. Boom, look at that. That is very nice. But again, the big drawback, like the Halberd and like the Great Hammer, re-stamina shields. 2 for a dodge count, 0% dodge bonus, so if you don't kill something with an X-Sword, you are definitely leaving yourself open because it's slow and it has almost no dodge capability. So you better kill what you're trying to attack. And moving on to A tier, I've got Kruber's Spear and Shield. Now, the biggest complaint I see people make of the Spear and Shield on Kruber is that it's too slow. Too slow, really? I mean, 0.63 seconds, 0.54 seconds on these first 2 light attacks. The third light attack I could see, yeah, it's a little slow. The push attack's really fast. These heavy attacks, you know, the first 2 are a decent speed. This third one might be considered a little bit slow. I think, though, that this is mostly in people's heads. I don't think it's quite as slow as people think it is. These first 2 light attacks, again, have nice cleave. Even these first 2 heavy attacks, again, pretty good cleave here. Really good stagger force on these heavy attacks, which make it really nice. The base damage, really good across the board. Up over 15 on all the 3 light attacks. The push attack, and then over 26 on the 3 heavy attacks, so that's really nice. For armored, you don't get much from the first 2 light attacks. You get a little bit, 8 from the third light attack and the push attack, but then of course the heavy attacks is really what you're going to want here to deal with armor. Heavy attack 1, heavy attack 2, and heavy attack 3, all for armor, and then you get tank modifiers on the first light attack and the first heavy attack, allowing you to deal with multiple armored targets. On top of all that, you get 5 stamina shields, 3 for a dodge count, and a 5% dodge bonus. Not terrible, all while having a 120-degree effective block angle, which is alright for a shield, but it's definitely higher than most weapons. This weapon, I believe, is different than other shield weapons because it can actually do some pretty freaking good damage. You can deal with hordes, you can deal with elites. It can be made much faster than it is, but it's already not that slow. I don't believe it's that slow. Mercenary could make it faster, Foot Knight can make it faster, you know. This weapon is pretty good, and if you make it faster, you become a tank. It also has an alt fire attack. You can block and attack at the same time. This is a really good weapon. Next up, and the final A tier weapon we have, is the Mace and Sword. So the Mace and Sword is a pretty popular choice among Kruber players. It's pretty fast. The first light attack, 0.48, the second and the third, all pretty fast. Even the fourth, a little slower, but not terrible. The push attack, though, is the favorite attack of people that like this weapon, as it's got really good cleave, pretty decent stagger force, but does damage to both infantry and armor. Has a linesman modifier, of course, as do the third light attack, the fourth light attack, and the 2 heavy attacks. Speaking of which, 0.58 seconds and 0.72 seconds on these heavy attacks is pretty nice. The cleave is pretty good across the board, but really good on the third and fourth light attack and the push attack, as well as these 2 heavy attacks. Your stagger force, nice on these first 2 light attacks. Pretty average on the rest of them. The base damage, not anything out of this world. Kind of just average base damage, which I think is kind of what holds this one back a little bit, but it has really good utility. It's good for both infantry, hordes, and armor. These heavy attacks can deal with armor. They don't do tons, but they do enough. On top of that, you have 3 stamina shields, a 3 effective dodge count, and a 15% dodge bonus, which can come in really handy. And now we are on to the final tier, S tier. And the first weapon I have up in there is the Tuskor Spear. So speaking of weapons that push attack a lot, the Tuskor Spear is one of the best ones out there. All of its attacks are really fast. 0.53 on the first light attack, 0.62. The third light attack a bit slower, 0.56 on the fourth light attack. The attack that matters the most is the push attack, which clocks in at 0.56 seconds. Has really good cleave, almost 9. Excellent stagger force at almost 24. I know this weapon can stagger Chaos Warriors repeatedly. Outside of that, it has pretty good base damage, especially that first heavy attack's really nice. The push attack, the most important one, the one that you're going to be using the most with this weapon. 18 right here is pretty good. 8.25 for armor is not like the most amazing thing ever, but it's got a tank modifier on it, which is excellent. Multiple armored targets. Same thing with the second heavy attack, so you can kind of knock some things around. You don't do tons of damage to them, but you get them the hell out of your way, which is cool. 4 stamina shields makes this one a little bit more defensive, but unfortunately only a 3 effective dodge count and a 0% dodge bonus. But look at this. You have an 180-degree effective block angle with the Tuskor Spear. That's more than the Spear and Shield. That's more than the Bretonnian Sword and Shield. That is more than the regular Sword and Shield. So, yeah. The Tuskor Spear. Pretty decent if you max out your block cost reduction. It can be a little bit of a defensive thing. Again, even a much better weapon with a handmaiden on the team. So, a little synergy tip for you there. This weapon is really good. Uses push attacks. Also uses its second heavy attack a lot. But even its other attacks are not that bad. You know, it's easy S tier choice for me. Next up in S tier, we've got the Mace and Shield. Now, the reason I didn't bring up the Mace and Shield when I was comparing shields in that last little bit is because the Mace and Shield actually has an 180-degree effective block angle as well, which is quite nice. Unfortunately, only a 2 dodge count and a 0 dodge bonus, but with 5 stamina shields and these attack sequences, it won't matter much. So let's look at the speeds first off. These first 2 light attacks a little slow, the third one a little faster, but the one that matters the most is the push attack, because that push attack here, just like Barden's Hammer and Shield, chains into a third light attack, which gets bonus 10% crit chance because it's an uppercut and has a tank modifier. You have a push attack, which is fast, an easy headshot, followed by an uppercut with crit chance, which pierces armor, which hits multiple armored targets. It's nice. The cleave limit, kind of high on the first 2 light attacks, nice on the first heavy attack, and pretty decent on the second heavy attack. The stagger force, however, is the talk of this weapon. These first 2 light attacks, quite a bit. This first heavy attack, a lot. Might I mention that this weapon also has a shield bash that comes first in the sequence of attacks, so you can make it really good temp health as well. It's not as fast as the sword and shields bash, unfortunately, so take that for what you will. But look at this base damage. Pretty good on these light attacks. The push attack, really good. Again, chaining into that third light attack. Those are your 2 best attacks on this weapon, and they can both deal with armor quite nicely. So this is a really good complement if you want to run a second weapon on Grail Knight. I almost always take this one because I like to have this safety blanket, if you will. These first 2 light attacks, well, first 3 actually have tank modifiers. This first heavy attack also has a tank modifier, which is nice. But pretty much the combo to use on this weapon is push attack into L3 and the occasional shield bash if you need to. Lots of stamina, you can attack a lot, you can do a lot of damage. And again, this 180 effective block angle can come in handy if you do need to take some hits and block them. And then the final weapon, my personal favorite for Kruber in S tier, is the Bretonnian Longsword. The Bretonnian Longsword is a great weapon, and let me tell you why. For hordes, I like to use a push, actually, and then a light attack 1, which is 0.63 seconds, followed by a light attack 2, which is 0.72 seconds, and then kind of block cancel, rinse, repeat. This is a weapon that's made really good by Opportunist, as you can stagger lots of stuff. You can look over here, and yeah, you've got really good stagger force on the first light attack, and both the heavy attacks, excellent stagger force, excellent cleave on those heavy attacks, excellent cleave on the first 2 light attacks. Really, really nice. Your base damage here, really good. Light attacks, this third light attack's kind of an overhead, so the same thing with this push attack. I believe that's a shield breaker as well, which is cool. But the best part about these weapons, this weapon, is the heavy attacks. All of them really good. You can block while holding a heavy attack on this weapon. So you can be blocking with your 3 stamina, and then the moment they like hit you and they kind of bounce off you, you can just counter. It's an extremely satisfying weapon to use. It's fun, has really good base damage. A lot of its attacks can deal with armor quite nicely. This third light attack, push attack, obviously these first 2 heavy attacks. But look at this, linesman on all the light attacks, linesman on the push attack, heavy linesman on the first 2 heavy attacks. Nothing for the third one, unfortunately. But 3 stamina shields, 3 effective dodge count, a 20% dodge bonus. That is a lot on a weapon that does this much damage. Really, really freaking good. This is my favorite Kruber weapon, and I have it in the S tier. So that is my updated tier list, guys. In S tier, I had the Brett Longsword, the Mason Shield, the Tuskor Spear. In A tier, I had the Mason Sword, the Spear and Shield. In B tier, I had the Executioner Sword, the Great Hammer, and the One-Handed Sword. In C tier, I had the Halberd, the Greatsword, and the Mace. And then down in D tier, I had both the Sword and Shield and the Bretonnian Sword and Shield. So guys, if you like this video, consider subscribing to this channel, leaving a comment, liking the video. I have a Discord, link is in the description down below. Feel free to join. We have 800 people in there, which is awesome. People looking to play and talking about builds and whatever all the time. Also a Patreon if you feel like supporting this channel. Link is also in the description down below. Guys, yeah, if you like this video, have a nice freaking day, and keep on keeping on. Ciao.